It had been 7 long years since Ethan Carter had last seen Claire Bennett, but the moment he spotted her again through the rain-speckled window of a quiet Seattle coffee shop, time folded in on itself. The world outside was gray, the kind of soft, moody rain that always reminded him of her. Claire had loved rainy days, said they made everything feel more honest. Now, she sat alone at a corner table, stirring her tea slowly, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. She looked older, but in a way that made her more beautiful. Her once long chestnut hair now fell in soft waves to her shoulders, streaked gently with honey blonde. She wore a dark green coat, the same color as the sweater she had left behind in his apartment all those years ago. Ethan stood across the street for a moment longer, unsure if he was ready. They hadn't spoken since the breakup. Not really. A few polite emails when her mother passed, a birthday text that went unanswered. And yet, here she was as back in town, without warning, sitting in a coffee shop that meant something to them once. It wasn't just any place. This was their place, where they had spent rainy Sunday mornings sharing cinnamon rolls and dreams of the future. Back then, they were in their 20s, wild, hopeful, full of ideas about careers, travel, art, and a love that felt invincible. But reality had come fast. Claire had been offered a fellowship in Toronto, and Ethan had just taken custody of his teenage sister after their mother passed away. He couldn't leave. She couldn't stay. There was no villain, no betrayal. Just life. And the love that wasn't strong enough to survive the distance, or maybe the silence. Ethan finally pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly. The smell of roasted coffee and something sweet hit him immediately. His heart pounded like he was 25 again, about to tell her he loved her for the first time. Claire looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a second, neither of them spoke. Her lips parted slightly, and her expression shifted, surprise, hesitation, then something warmer, something tender. "Ethan," she said softly, as if tasting his name again after a long absence. He walked toward her table, uncertain whether to hug her or just sit. She solved it by standing up and embracing him gently. It was brief, but in that moment, something buried stirred between them. Something neither of them had dared to touch in years. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Claire said as they sat down. "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But I saw the message, and I figured if you were really here, I couldn't not see you." She smiled, a little shy, like a woman seeing an old lover in a dream she didn't know she still had. The conversation started slow, awkward even, like people relearning a language they once spoke fluently. But the comfort between them was still there, soft and real. They didn't talk about the past just yet. Instead, they talked about the weather, how Seattle hadn't changed, and the strange way time pulls people apart while keeping memories painfully close. Ethan noticed the tiny freckle beneath her left eye was still there, the one he used to kiss every morning. And Claire noticed that Ethan still rubbed his thumb across the rim of his coffee cup when he was nervous. It was small, but it meant something. Sitting across from each other again, with years of distance between them and a storm outside, it felt like something was beginning, or maybe, something had never really ended. The next evening, Ethan found himself standing outside the same coffee shop, heart pounding just like the night before. He didn't know why he agreed to see her again, maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was hope, but as soon as he stepped inside and saw Claire sitting there with 2 cups of coffee waiting, he knew the real reason. He had never truly let her go. This time, there was less hesitation. They hugged again, a little longer, a little warmer, like the space between them was already shrinking. Their conversation picked up where it had left off, what they'd been doing all these years, how life had taken them in different directions. Claire talked about Toronto, about opening her own art therapy studio, and how she worked with trauma patients, helping them express what words couldn't. Ethan told her about staying in Seattle, about raising his younger sister until she graduated, and about working with troubled teens who reminded him of himself at that age. There was pride in both of them, but also something missing, a quiet longing they didn't speak aloud. Every so often, their eyes met for just a second too long. It was unspoken, but both of them felt it, the ache of what could have been. I always wondered, Claire said softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the cafe, if you hated me for leaving. Ethan shook his head slowly. I never hated you. I just didn't know how to hold on when everything was pulling us apart. She looked down, tracing her finger along the edge of her mug. It hurt. More than I thought it would. I told myself I'd move on. I even tried dating again. But it always came back to you. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't expect her to say it. Maybe he dreamed of hearing it, but now that it was real, it stirred something deep in him, something dangerous and beautiful. Same here. He admitted. I kept thinking one day I'd forget your voice, your laugh, but I never did. The honesty between them was raw now. It wasn't like the love stories of their 20s. This was different, grown-up, messy, full of regrets and quiet what-ifs. They weren't kids anymore. They were people who had lived through heartbreak, disappointment, and long nights alone. And yet, here they were, sitting across from each other with open hearts for the first time in years. When they stepped outside together, the air was cool and crisp, the rain having passed. The streets sparkled under the glow of the city lights. They didn't say goodbye right away. Instead, they walked, slowly, through familiar streets, letting their feet lead them while memories wrapped around them like the fall breeze. Do you remember that night we sat by the lake and talked about what kind of house we'd live in someday? Claire asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Ethan chuckled. You wanted big windows and a garden. I just wanted you. Her eyes softened. I never stopped wanting that. They paused outside her hotel. It was late, but neither wanted the moment to end. A silence settled between them, not awkward, but heavy with possibility. Claire looked up at him, and Ethan could feel the tension pull tighter, like a thread between them that had never snapped, only stretched. For a second, he thought about kissing her. Just once. Just to see if it still felt like home. But before he could move, Claire whispered, Ethan, if we're going to do this, we have to be honest. About everything. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. She wasn't talking about just a kiss. She was talking about them. Their story. Their past. Their future. He could feel it. This wasn't just two old lovers catching up. This was something waking up between them again. Fragile and full of promise. Something that neither of them could ignore anymore. The next few days unfolded like a quiet, unexpected dream, soft, slow, and full of moments that neither Ethan nor Claire dared to rush. What started as one spontaneous coffee turned into dinners, long walks, and conversations that filled the empty spaces time had left behind. Claire extended her stay in Seattle under the excuse of needing a break, but deep down, she knew it had everything to do with him. Ethan didn't push. He just showed up, offering her his time, his presence. His quiet smile that still made her chest flutter. They went back to places they once called theirs. The used bookstore tucked into an old brick alley where they used to read poetry aloud to each other. The rooftop of Ethan's old apartment building where they once danced under the stars. Slow and barefoot, without music. Even the tiny food truck by the lake where they used to split spicy tacos at midnight. Each stop was a memory, and each memory stirred something that felt more alive now than it ever had in their 20s, but it wasn't just nostalgia pulling them together. It was who they had become in the years apart. Ethan, once impulsive and guarded, now carried a quiet strength. He'd lost things, his mother, a few friends, but he had grown into a man who knew how to stay, how to show up. Claire, once restless and full of ambition, now had a calmness to her. She had chased her dreams, yes, but in doing so, had realized that success meant little without someone to share it with. They talked about the in-between years, the relationships that didn't last, the mistakes they made, the nights they cried for each other without reaching out. "I painted you, you know," Claire admitted one evening as they sat by the lake, the skyline flickering in the distance. "A dozen times. I told myself it was just art, but really, I was trying to remember your face." Ethan smiled faintly, his voice low and steady. "I kept your old voicemail. The one from the airport. I still listen to it sometimes, when I miss you too much." That night, as they walked back through the quiet city streets, something shifted between them. Not with words, but in the way they stood closer, in the way their fingers brushed. Outside her hotel, Claire hesitated again, just like she had the night before. But this time, there was no need to speak. The kiss happened naturally, as if time had simply waited for them to be ready. It was soft, not rushed, the kind of kiss that tasted like memory and possibility. Her hand found the side of his face. His fingers curled gently into her coat. When their lips finally parted, neither said a word. They just looked at each other, breathing in what they'd both been missing, but just as quickly as the warmth of that moment settled in, reality returned. Claire took a step back, visibly shaken. "This changes everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. And it did. Because now, what they had could no longer be boxed into old memories or dismissed as a sweet reunion. It was real. Alive. And it came with questions. What now? What next? Could they risk their hearts again after all this time? Could they undo the pain of the past and build something new? The kiss didn't answer those questions, but it did make one thing clear: the love they thought had faded wasn't gone. It had only been waiting. Quietly. Patiently. And now that it had returned, neither of them could pretend it didn't matter. Not anymore. The days after the kiss felt different, brighter somehow, yet heavier with the weight of everything unspoken. Neither Ethan nor Claire brought it up directly, but it lingered between them like a heartbeat, quiet and persistent. They moved through the city in a new rhythm, one filled with glances that held more meaning, touches that lasted just a second longer, and silences that were rich with emotion. But they both knew the clock was ticking. Claire's flight back to Toronto was only a few days away, and the reality they had so easily ignored now loomed like a question neither of them wanted to answer. One evening, as they sat by the lake again, wrapped in soft scarves and late October chill, Ethan finally broke the silence. "Do you think we waited too long?" he asked, his voice low, steady, as if afraid the wrong word might shatter everything. Claire looked at him, her eyes soft with sadness and something more. "Maybe. Or maybe, we just weren't ready before now." She reached for his hand, and he let her take it. There was comfort in the way their fingers fit together, like even after all these years, some part of them had been holding on. They didn't try to plan the future that night. They just let themselves feel it, feel the love that had never truly left, the pain that came with remembering, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The next morning, Claire began packing her suitcase. Ethan came. Bai helped her fold the last of her clothes, and tried not to show how much it hurt. He wanted to ask her to stay. He wanted to promise her a different ending this time. But he didn't. Because love, real love, he'd learned, wasn't about demands or ultimatums. It was about truth. And the truth was, she had a life in Toronto. And he couldn't ask her to walk away from it without knowing if they were truly ready. At the airport, everything moved too fast. The announcements, the crowds, the tight embrace that felt too short. Ethan handed her a small, folded letter before she walked through the security gate. "Read it on the plane," he said, eyes locked on hers. She nodded, lips pressed tight to hold back tears. "I will." And then she was gone high above the clouds. Claire sat by the window with the letter in her lap. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. It wasn't long. Just a few honest, handwritten lines. "You were never a chapter 1 closed. You've always been the part 1 read again and again. Hoping I didn't miss something important. If there's even a piece of you that still believes in us, come back. Not to the past. Not to who we were. But to who we could be now. I'll wait." She pressed the letter to her chest, her heart aching in that bittersweet way only true love can cause. Outside, the sky stretched wide and endless, and for the first time in years, Claire didn't feel alone. Back in Seattle, Ethan stood by the lake, hands in his pockets, watching the autumn leaves fall gently into the water. He didn't know what would happen next. But he had spoken his truth. And sometimes, that was enough. Days passed. Then a week. Until one afternoon, as the wind picked up and the clouds rolled over the horizon, he turned around, and there she was. Claire, standing by the bench, suitcase by her side, eyes full of everything she hadn't said in that letter. "I read it," she whispered. "And I came back." Ethan walked to her slowly, carefully, as if afraid she might disappear. But she didn't. She stayed. And when he reached for her hand, she held on, because some things do end. But the ones that matter, the real ones, sometimes find their way back. Even after all the years. Even after just one kiss.